So tell us, Cameron, since you're here, your thoughts about this Cowboy Bebop being canceled after one season. And not only just one season, how swift this came out.
Yeah, and how it was announced it's canceled rather than just floating away, which is the
Right.
normal Netflix thing. I When this was first announced, I was on a midnight at Friday morning, and our lovely was on present with me, so I had a gut reaction, and I thought about that gut reaction because my gut reactions are all often just intuitions, and I try to say, where did that come from? My gut reaction hasn't changed, but I've now processed why I had that reaction, why I believe it. So my gut reaction, if you remember, was I was like, oh, they set this up to fail. Those words came out of my mouth. If you remember, you were on the thing. And I just said that without thinking deeper about it. It just came from my gut. So I've thought about that. And so I had some experiences with Netflix this year, which I had a very interesting parallel experience. So my opinion remains that this project, which should have been a massive success coming off of massively successful underlying anime, yet when people saw the initial things from the stills, like, wait a minute, what are they doing with it? Why are they doing it? Why are they not fulfilling the potential of this great underlying material, right? It's this first major, huge anime thing. And then it's disappointing, and then it's very quickly canceled, loudly canceled. So what if, I'm going to give you a hypothetical, and I don't think these actions are necessarily done consciously. My experience with Hollywood is that a lot of this stuff is very subconscious, just like the racism is. They don't know they're racists. It's something I think that Chris Rock actually once said, is that Hollywood is full of the nicest racists you're ever going to meet. They don't know they're racist, right? It's true. They don't know. They have no idea, right? And I voted for Obama twice. How could I be a racist, right? So they don't know. And so why would I want this project I spent all these millions of dollars on to fail, right? And it's not conscious. The choices are not conscious. Yet the actions reveal the things, because the actions, when you have a choice to do something properly and then you do it improperly, why did you make that choice? What motivated you, right? To not, they had the money for the most incredible costume designers, production designers, screenwriters, and action coordinators and stunt people. So why was the end result this? That was so disappointing to people. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that this project was set up to fail from the beginning. Perhaps subconsciously, but it was set up to fail. Because, and I said this on Midnight's Edge on Friday, just again from the gut, and then I'm going to give you a reason from my own experience, is that my gut was that the industry is threatened by anime. The industry is threatened by Japanese art and by Japanese artistic voices and attempts to co-opt them. As we saw recently with Disney Plus's new, the stuff that they're doing with sort of anime versions of Star Wars cartoons.
Oh, Visions.
Right.
Yeah, I enjoyed the one I saw at my brother-in-law's
I liked
place.
it.
It was beautiful.
I liked it too.
And it was good that they gave freedom to this. But it was something, on one level, they're drawn to this because they know there's a massive market. My niece is anime and manga obsessed. The next generation, much more than my generation, very deeply into this. My niece has started learning Japanese. She's actually quite good in speaking Japanese just because she loves anime and manga so much, right? She's self-teaching herself Japanese from YouTube videos.
Wow.
Right? So they know, objectively, they know that this is a major market. It's a growing market for the next generation, very much so. And yet, to acknowledge that, which is what Star Wars did under Mr. Favreau, they gave power to the Japanese animators and the Japanese storytellers. That's something Hollywood is quite nervous about, actually giving up storytelling power to another nation and another culture, right? They have to co-opt the voices of the other culture. They can't actually give it its own voice, because Hollywood for a century has been the propaganda arm of sort of the American elite. Right. And they shape the global narratives on everything from politics to culture, all this, all the gender narratives that Hollywood was promoting 5 years ago have gone global through a lot of the Hollywood stuff. Right. So giving power to Japanese anime and manga, in my opinion, is something that is seen as giving up power to cultural dominance.
Right.
Of Hollywood. So again, people aren't sitting there. A lot of people who deal with it, they're not that smart. All they know is what they're motivated to act on a visceral level in a certain way. Right. And it's because they sense their power would, the racism of I have to, defer to a Japanese guy. That racism starts getting to play. And it comes from the deeper thing of I'm threatened that my cultural power is now having to share with this other culture. So now let me give you the example from a recent experience that I had with Netflix personally.
Okay.
Right? So earlier this year, I developed a project that was very similar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but set in the world of jinn, the genies, the Islamic idea of jinn, and which is a major part of the culture, a huge part The entire Muslim world believes in these things. It's not like, well, it's part of the religion that there's these other spirits that are amongst us and they have these supernatural powers. It's very much part of the cultural narrative today for 1 billion people. And yet, amazingly, Hollywood has never really done any exploration of these entities. You had sort of, the blue genie from Aladdin and stuff like that, but it never really done in a way that explores this incredibly vast myth of an entire living culture today. So I did this Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, which we called Jinn Hunter, which was essentially about a Pakistani American girl in New York who discovers that she has this destiny she doesn't want, which is to face these jinn who are now appearing and breaking through the dimensional doorway. And it was a really fun show. And I had a really big director partner, and I was excited about it. So we pitched it, and we pitched it to Netflix. The reason we pitched it to Netflix is the director had a deal there, right? Or he had very strong relationships there. He was convinced he was going to sell it. We pitched it, and you can imagine I threw my heart into this because I wanted to sell this, and this is something that had not been done. And I was like, if anyone's going, it's going to be me if anyone's going to do it right. We do it. We pitch. We don't hear anything for a week, which is always never a great sign. And then we come back and we hear a pass. And I'm okay with the pass. The mistake they made is they gave a pass with the explanation. Just pass, guys. Because when you give the explanation, it always reveals the little old man behind the curtain, right? Don't give the explanation, right? Just say, it's not for us, pass. Because when you give your explanation, I'm going to deconstruct it like I do on Midnight's Edge and here on Toxic Femininity. So the pass and the explanation that came with it was, we already did this. I'm like, what do you mean you already did this? There's never been any major show about the jinn on Netflix or anywhere else, really. As a, there might be an episode of like the Vampire Diaries or something that has the creature, but it's not really part of it. And so they were referencing that 2 years before, Netflix in the Middle East had done a jinn miniseries or jinn series in Arabic, filmed in Jordan. I was familiar with this show.
Really?
And the show was touted at the time as the first breakthrough looking at, but again, it was for Arabic language Netflix. It wasn't English dubbed. Now it might be available on Netflix, but at the time,
very different approach. Yeah.
And it bombed for a specific reason. The showrunner was not Arab or Muslim. He wasn't from the culture. He was a nice British guy, nice little colonial guy coming in. And guess what? He tried to make a show about gender narratives. He filmed in Jordan in Arabic for an Arabic audience. And,
wow.
And you have the main
that's
girl,
what you
the
do.
heroine has 2 boyfriends and she's making out.
What?
It's the culture that doesn't like people kissing on camera. You've got the Arab girl, this young girl having multiple boyfriends she's dating and making out with and doing stuff. While the show's supposed to be about jinn, so the outrage in Jordan, of course, the Jordanian government was like, "Oh yes, Hollywood people come film here." They didn't never bother to read the script because that's what they always do, right? And then the show gets made, and then it's broadcast, and there's mass outcry
Wow.
in the Arab world saying this is sexually offensive. This is immoral. How can you make a show about an Arab woman who's banging a couple of different guys? It's supposed to be about a jinn, right? And so it's like, because the nice British colonial showrunner he wanted to raise the sexual awareness of Muslim peoples, right? And to do it. And so that show bombed, caused protests, caused a lot of anger. The Jordanian government basically expelled the production from Jordan because they never bothered to read the damn script when they greenlit it at the first place.
Right.
They're so excited to be Hollywood. Oh my God. They never read it because that's how I've dealt with the Middle East. They're so excited to be around famous Hollywood people that they're like, oh yes, Tom Cruise, whatever you want. Oh, Tom Cruise is doing this thing that's not going to work in Islamic culture. Oh, we're embarrassed now. Whatever.
God.
So that show was then canceled. And then Netflix, as they said to me, we're not going to do a jinn project ever again because it wasn't successful. I was like,
wow.
so you set that project up to fail with this British colonial guy coming in, bringing inappropriate sexual narratives in Arabic to a Muslim culture that had nothing to do with the jinn underlying story of the ghosts and the spirits and whatever. You had to put that in there because that was your agenda. You got shocked by the outrage, which you shouldn't have been, because of course you had no Muslims running the project and asked me to get involved, right? So they're startled that maybe Muslims might be sexually conservative. That startled them, right? They didn't know that. And so now Netflix is not going to be doing any jinn projects. They set it up to fail. So I come in, I was like, mine is I'm religious. I'm from that culture. My English language epic show was going to be this fun Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing that's going to bring this concept to the world and satisfy that audience that had been offended.
Right.
So, Tom, it looks like you want to interject. Please join us.
Oh, I was just going to say you should have tried to sell them rummy instead of gin, maybe.
Yeah. Well, people do, while in theory we're not supposed to drink if you go to Dubai, lots of alcohol flowing there, right?
But
So,
do you
yeah.
think that the problem is that
Mhm.
going your route
Yeah.
would take away from them the ability to curate this very specific narrative that they're trying to convey? And
That's the
that's what
whole
they
point,
simply cannot
Jane.
allow.
Jane, that's the
And
whole point, is they can't let me control this narrative
Right.
authentically from that
Mhm.
culture and making a universal fun Buffy type adventure show. Oh, there's Nina. I hope you're
Hey,
feeling better, Nina.
Hey,
Nina.
Nina.
Nina, you should
Hope
be
you're
here. I'm talking
feeling
about Nicholas J.
better.
Gin stuff, and you're not here for this. If you can wipe your nose, come join us and join us for this. But so that shocked me. Again, all you have to do is pass. But when you come back with that as your explanation, that
Mhm.
reveals the little old man behind
Mhm.
the curtain,
Oh,
saying you set
it-
that project up to fail. And now,
Yeah.
2 years later, when certainly no one in the West heard of that project,
Mhm.
I'm showing up to do an English language fun Buffy type show with this new monster that has never been explored by Hollywood. But you're never going to explore that world again because you're going to use that as your excuse. So Cowboy Bebop has now allowed them to say, anime just doesn't translate.
Yeah, we can't
Here's
take another
one
chance.
here's
Wow.
one thing, and this is the other scary part.
Mhm.
The people who did Cowboy Bebop are doing the live action version of One Piece. If
Yeah, I
you
heard
think
about that.
Cowboy Bebop is huge, One Piece is like to the nth power.
And where's that going to be released? Is it will be on Netflix or somewhere else?
Netflix.
Netflix.
All right, so let's
They
see.
already announced the cast and everything. And
Okay.
what they did with Cowboy Bebop and listening to what you're saying, Cameron, I really am worried what they're going to do
So
with
let's
that.
see what they do. If this next one is well done and you're all satisfied with it, they learned their lesson.
Mm-hmm.
If it is not, then you will know for a fact that it is being sabotaged on purpose.
And to add to what Cameron is saying, what supports this as well in regards to Cowboy Bebop is that article that they had where they stated that, what's great about the live action series is that it fixes what was wrong
Right.
with the anime. Julia should have never happened to Julia. But if we have this live action, we can go ahead and fix what was wrong and make it right. And, we don't have to, have
Sorry, I'm making
stories
people-
that do things like that to characters. What they're essentially talking about is that they're saying the anime didn't do the right thing.
Yeah, so
And
so the
now-
cultural narrative of that story was inappropriate by our standards.
Yes.
Yes. And so, that makes that they're almost telling people against whatever their personal biases against that. That's that anime just wasn't right. There was something wrong in that. There was
These
something
poor
wrong.
Japanese people
There's
are
something
primitive
wrong
in
in
their
your thinking.
Yeah.
So we have to fix
You
that.
can't think that way. That's not progressive. That's not hip.
Well,
That's not
and
with the
exactly.
times.
And it's really offensive that inaccurately, poorly done story got so popular. That somehow the audience is
It
foolishly
really
and
is a
unwisely connected with it.
shame that so many people picked up on that story, but we're hoping that when you watch the live action, you'll see that what should have happened to Julia. Because what
Yeah.
happened to her in the anime should have never happened. It's like the most ridiculous thing ever. It's someone's creation and they don't want that creation to have a voice.
But that's their entire approach to everything from the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
That's why we're seeing reboots that fix the original
Like,
so that
as
it better
people are
suits their
saying,
narrative.
Mhm.
West
It's
Side Story.
problematic.
That's fixing
Yes.
the original.
Yes.
Insulting, God rest her soul, Natalie Wood. You've got the lead actress of this movie with no experience whatsoever coming out and basically panning Natalie Wood, one of the greatest actresses of all time, whose
Mhm.
grave I regularly visit when I go to Westwood Memorial Cemetery. I go to Marilyn Monroe's grave and I go to Natalie Wood's grave. And there's always fresh flowers there. But they had to fix it.
Yes, and another thing too, we were talking about the lead actor in this live action series, and I had mentioned Dear Evan Hansen, and Dear Evan Hansen was an incredibly popular musical, and the movie just came out, and everybody's talking about it. I think it premiered at Toronto and at Cannes, and it really, the movie was a big deal. And they chose to employ the lead actor from one of the versions on Broadway. But it's now 10 years later, maybe even 15 years later. And he no longer looks like someone who is in high school anymore. He certainly doesn't even look like a 20-year-old anymore. So now here he is playing a 15-year-old boy or a 14-year-old boy in high school. And, and it isn't believable. We love him. We love this guy, but it just isn't believable. You see,
Sabotage.
they couldn't go ahead and say, he's an older version. We can't. This is a 15-year-old character, so you can't change it like the way they did or try to do it in Bebop. And what's happened is that it's actually making people feel uncomfortable that they're going back in and changing the man's face so he can look like a younger person. I wonder if they're going to do that with Cowboy Bebop. You never know.
You never.
It'd give them the opportunity to go ahead and fix whatever they thought was wrong and spend a ton more money on this. I wouldn't be surprised what they might do. But, I think it also goes to show you that sometimes you just cannot have someone who is 45 playing a role that was supposed to be somebody younger. And it's not ageism. It's just the character. That's all it is.
Oh, it's the meme that we have, hello, fellow young people, that meme, right? Because it's so ridiculous for him to show up at this high school looking like that. I mean, it's that's a joke of it. And now I have to say, I have to apologize. I've done it again. Jane, I spoke over you because you have such a soft voice and I'm so energetic. I spoke over you and I apologize. I'm going to try not to do that.
No, it's fine.
I'll tell you what, since we do have to get to some super chats,
Yes.
what are some last thoughts before we close this topic? Jane, you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't believe that Hollywood has learned their lesson. I don't believe Netflix has learned either. Whether this was intentional sabotage or simply being upset that they can't control the narrative with all of these different projects failing. I am curious to see what they do next, but I'm hopeful that more and more fans are responding and getting these things, frankly, shut down, because it's the only way they're ever going to understand that we are not simply going to consume the crap that they're trying to sell.
Last thoughts?
Yes, I was going to say that I really enjoyed this, provisional theater version of Cowboy Bebop, live action provisional theater. I think that it was a great holiday experiment. And I just want to congratulate the actors, for adapting to the roles, and it was a one go run. And it was funny to laugh at, but certainly not what we were hoping for. And I know they put their best foot forward. I still would have liked to have seen Danielle Pineda look beautiful and stunning and sexy in this, and see all the guys drool over her. I would have liked to have seen something like that, but that's okay. And, let's just hope that Cho will get roles that he deserves that are better and well suited for him, because he's a great actor.
Kamran?
I mean, I've said what I think I came here to say, which is that this town remains what it is, and yet I remain the voice of hope. I have come in, I still remain, the things are changing. And if we are able to, while I'm here, I'd love to talk about some of the startling developments today with Disney Plus canceling a show that I didn't expect them to cancel. The show about the young Latina girl who will one day be president, they canceled it today. So there are changes happening, not everywhere, and not as fast as we'd like, and not perfectly, but there are certainly changes happening at parts of this town, and we will see the results of that over the next year. And so, this is not surprising to me. Let's see what they do with the next anime, and if it is bad, then that this is being done on purpose.
Yeah, because I know for me, as a big anime fan, I was looking forward to this, and I was sorely disappointed. So I'm hoping that they learn their lesson with One Piece, and they actually approach that project with the seriousness that it deserves with respecting the source material. If they do that, then it's okay. Then it's something that I can roll with. But if they screw it up, Kamran, like you say, if they set it up to fail, that is heartbreaking, because that's, again, yet another beloved anime that a studio gets its hands on that could actually do it right, and they choose not to. So hoping that's not going to happen. But like I said, One Piece is huge, so we're gonna see what they do with that.